The transport vessel Starfall drifted through the silent sea of stars, its hull a patchwork of recycled metal and hope. It was one of thousands, a relic of a mass exodus that had no destination, only a direction. Away. Away from the gutted husk of Earth, the wars, the rising tides, and the final desperate silence of the global communication networks. The people on board weren't colonists or explorers. They were survivors, a floating census of humanity's last, ragged breaths. And they carried with them the weight of a failed world and the quiet, simmering anger of a species that had been given a death sentence by its own home. The ship's designated leader was a woman named Ilara, a former logistics engineer from what used to be Cairo. Leadership wasn't a title she'd sought. It was a burden that had settled on her shoulders like the ship's recycled air, heavy and a little stale. Her days were a relentless cycle of ration calculations, air filter maintenance, and mediating disputes over a stolen protein bar. Hope was the most scarce commodity on the Starfall, and it was running out. It was during a routine deep space scan that the tension broke, replaced by a cold, new dread. A klaxon blared, its sound a rusty spike in the quiet hum of the ship. On the monitor, a vessel materialized from behind a dense asteroid field. It was beautiful in a way that felt threatening, sleek, polished, and massive. Its hull shimmered with an opalescent sheen, and its movements were silent and graceful. It was a Xylosian cruiser. The Xylosians were the undisputed masters of this sector of the galaxy. They were ancient, wise, and powerful, their civilization having flourished for millennia while humanity was still figuring out fire. First contact, when it came over the comm, was not a greeting but a proclamation. The Xylosian face that filled the screen was elegant, with large, liquid dark eyes and skin that seemed to shift with subtle colors. Its expression was one of detached curiosity, like a scientist examining a new species of bacteria. Primitive vessel, the Xylosian's voice was a melodic, synthesized tone. You have entered sovereign space. State your origin and purpose. Ilara straightened her back, her own reflection a ghost in the corner of the screen next to the alien's flawless image. This is the transport Starfall. We are refugees from the Sol system. We mean no harm. Yet we are simply seeking a place to rebuild. The Xylosian's head tilted, a gesture of what might have been amusement. Refugees, from the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star, we observed your kind's final, frantic broadcasts, self-inflicted ecological collapse, nuclear brinksmanship, resource wars. You are a species defined by conflict and excess. You are a contagion. The words hung in the recycled air of the bridge, poisoning it. The few crew members present looked at the deck. But we're trying to survive. Survival is survival. 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 Survival, but we're trying to survive. Survival is not a right granted to the incompetent, the Xylosian replied. Your species is a failed experiment in sentience. You will not be permitted to spread your chaos into our peaceful domain. You will leave this sector immediately. Then any attempt to proceed will be met with lethal force. The screen went dark. The Starfall was alone again, but now with a clear and present danger ahead of them and the cold, dead void behind them. There was nowhere to go. Ilara called a ship-wide meeting. The message was relayed through crackling speakers into every cramped corridor and shared cabin. The news was met not with fear, but with a heavy, weary silence. Then, a low murmur began to build. It wasn't a murmur of panic. It was a murmur of something else entirely. It was the sound of a people who had been pushed to the very edge, who had lost their planet, their future, and now were being denied even the right to exist. An old man from what used to be a place called Siberia, his face a road map of deep wrinkles, stood up in the crowd. They called us a contagion, he rasped, his voice carrying over the murmur. They called us failed. A woman holding a child close to her chest spoke up, on her voice shaking with a cold fury. They looked at our suffering, at the death of our world, and they called it incompetence. They didn't see the families we lost. They didn't see the people who stayed behind so we could leave. The murmur grew into a rumble. Ilara watched them, these tired, hungry, desperate people. They were scared, yes. But underneath the fear, she saw something igniting. It was a deep, primal, and utterly human reaction to being dismissed, to being deemed unworthy. It was the same fire that had driven them to cross oceans on wooden rafts, to climb the highest mountains, to split the atom. It wasn't hope for a better future that was fueling them now. It was raw, incandescent anger at being told they had no right to a future at all. They have their perfect ships, the old man continued, his voice growing stronger. Their ancient wisdom, their peaceful domain. But look at us. We are still here. Our world burned, and we are still here. Our engines are held together with prayer and scrap metal, and we are still here. Another voice from the crowd. What do they know about survival? Have they ever watched their oceans die? Have they ever had to bury their own children in the poisoned ground and keep walking? The question wasn't directed at the Xylosians anymore. It was a realization. The Xylosians, for all their power, had never faced extinction. They had never known the desperate, clawing, innovative fury of a species with its back against the final wall. They looked at humanity's wars and saw chaos. They didn't see the desperate, terrible creativity that war could also spawn. They looked at their pollution and saw failure. They didn't see the industrial might it represented, a might that could be turned to other purposes. Alara felt a shift in the air. The despair that had permeated the ship for months was being burned away by a new, hotter emotion. It wasn't a plan, not yet. It was a change in state, water into steam, fear into fury. The Xylosians, in their arrogance, had made a critical miscalculation. They had threatened a cornered animal, and a cornered animal, when it has nothing left to lose, is the most dangerous thing in the universe. The Starfall was no longer just a collection of refugees. It was a powder keg, and the Xylosian cruiser was a lit match, hovering just close enough to spark the inferno. And the first wave of Xylosian shuttlecraft descended upon the Starfall with the condescending confidence of pest control. They expected compliance, perhaps a pathetic last-ditch plea for mercy. They expected the fear their species' name had cultivated for centuries. They were not prepared for what they found. The interior of the human ship was a labyrinth of jury-rigged systems and cramped quarters. The Xylosian soldiers, armed with sleek, non-lethal stun weapons designed to pacify unruly primitives, moved in disciplined squads. Their environmental suits, pristine and white, were a stark contrast to the grimy, patched walls of the corridor they were clearing. They found no one. The main corridors were empty. The communal areas were deserted. A profound silence hung in the air, broken only by the hum of the ship's failing life support. The squad leader, a Xylosian named Xylar, felt a flicker of unease. But this was not the behavior of a frightened species. This was the stillness of a trap. Then, the lights went out. Total, absolute darkness swallowed them. The only sounds were the hiss of their own breathing apparatus and the sudden, panicked clicks of their helmet lights being activated. In that single, vulnerable moment, the humans struck. They didn't fight like a military. They fought like cornered survivors. From the crawl spaces above, from the maintenance tunnels below, and from behind panels that slid silently open, they came. They had no sophisticated weapons. They had pipes wrenched from the walls. They had the jagged edges of shattered plating. They had tools designed for repair, now repurposed for destruction. An old woman, the one from Siberia, swung a heavy, rusted crowbar into the helmet of the nearest Xylosian soldier. The sleek, advanced material cracked, and the soldier crumpled, its systems screaming in a language of error codes. A team of former dock workers used cargo nets to tangle 3 soldiers together, then overwhelmed them with sheer weight of numbers. It was brutal, ugly, and terrifyingly efficient. The Xylosians' non-lethal intentions were met with lethal, desperate force. Their training was for orderly combat in open spaces, not this chaotic, close-quarters nightmare. Their stun beams, designed to incapacitate, often missed in the darkness, while the humans, who had evolved in the unpredictable shadows of a dangerous world, moved with an instinctive, terrifying grace. Xylar, separated from his squad, found himself in a small, dark chamber, someone's quarters. A figure stood before him, silhouetted against a small viewport that showed the distant, uncaring stars. It was Alara. She held a heavy wrench in her hand. "Your ship is being overrun," Xylar stated, his voice betraying a tremor he couldn't hide. "Reinforcements will come. You cannot win. You are proving our point. You are violent, chaotic savages." Alara looked at him, her face illuminated by the starlight. There was no anger in her eyes now, only a grim, determined resolve. "You're not listening," she said, her voice low and steady. "We're not fighting to win. We're fighting to make a point." She stepped closer, and Xylar, for the first time in his millennia-long life, felt a primal fear. It wasn't the weapon she held, and it was the look in her eyes, the look of someone who had already lost everything and therefore had nothing to fear from him. "Our point," she continued, "is that you cannot threaten a species that has already died. You can't scare people who have already lived through their own apocalypse. You call us a failed experiment. We are the result of a failed experiment, and we are still here. We are the thing that crawled out of the ashes, and we are very, very unhappy about it." Back on the Xylosian cruiser, the commander watched in disbelief as the tactical display showed his boarding parties being systematically neutralized. Their life signs were winking out, not in a blaze of energy fire, but one by one, in the dark. The humans weren't just defending themselves, they were taking the fight to them. Small, improvised boarding craft, little more than escape pods with maneuvering thrusters, were launched from the starfall. See, they weren't trying to dock, they were trying to crash. One such pod, piloted by a teenager who had learned to fly in a simulator game back on Earth, slammed into the Xylosian cruiser's main sensor array. The resulting explosion was small, but it blinded the great ship. Another, packed with all the chemical propellant the starfall could spare, was detonated against one of its elegant, gleaming engine nacelles. The damage was superficial, a mere scratch on the hull. But the message was clear. They were willing to use themselves as weapons. The Xylosian commander stared at the readings from the human ship. It was a death trap. Its radiation shielding was failing. Its life support was critically compromised. The humans were breathing their own recycled waste. They were slowly poisoning themselves just by being alive. And yet, they were attacking him with the ferocity of a wounded animal. He had expected a refugee camp in space. He had found a hive of feral, desperate, and utterly unpredictable beings. He had called them a failed experiment. But as he watched his perfect ship take damage from a collection of flying junk, a horrifying thought occurred to him. What if humanity wasn't a failure? What if this insane, suicidal, unstoppable drive to survive was the very definition of success? The attack didn't last long. It didn't need to. When the Xylosian commander opened a channel, his elegant face was a mask of controlled fury and profound shock. "Cease this madness," he demanded. Ilara's face appeared on his screen, smudged with grease and something that looked horribly like blood. "Call off your dogs," she said simply. The commander hesitated. His soldiers were either incapacitated or being held hostage in the bowels of the human ship. His own vessel, while not crippled, had been humiliated. The cost of utterly destroying this primitive scow was now outweighed by the cost of admitting that they had failed to subdue it peacefully. You are all insane," he whispered, the words escaping before he could stop them. Ilara almost smiled. "No, we're just not happy. And when humanity isn't happy, we tend to make it everyone's problem." The standoff was broken not by a surrender, but by a grudging tactical retreat. The Xylosian cruiser, its pride wounded far more deeply than its hull, powered up its main drives and moved away. It didn't go far. It simply withdrew to a safer distance, its weapons still trained on the starfall, but its intent changed. Attack was off the table. Now, it was a siege. The Xylosian commander, whose name was Valerius, found himself in an unprecedented position. His vast knowledge of galactic history, his species' accumulated wisdom, offered no precedent for this. He had encountered aggressive species before, and they had been crushed. He had encountered pleading, desperate species, and they had been pitied and guided. He had never encountered a species that responded to an extinction-level threat with this kind of wild, inventive, self-destructive fury. He initiated a new dialogue, this time devoid of the condescending tone. "What is it you want?" he asked. the question genuine. Alara, exhausted and leaning against a bulkhead on her battered ship, replied, "The same thing we've always wanted, a place to exist, to try again. We're not asking for your pity or your charity. We're just asking you to get out of our way." "You attacked us," Valerius pointed out, the disbelief still clear in his voice. "You threatened to destroy us for the crime of still being alive," Alara shot back. "What did you expect us to do? Lie down and die? That's not what we do. That's never been what we do. You looked at our history and saw a series of failures. We look at it and see a series of survivals. We survived the ice ages. We survived plagues that wiped out cities. We survived ourselves. Barely. But we did it. And we'll survive you." The conversation was being broadcast by Alara's order throughout both ships. On the Starfall, the survivors listened, their grimy faces lifted, their eyes holding a new light. It wasn't the soft light of hope. It was the hard, bright light of defiance. On the Xylosian cruiser, and to them, survival was a state of being. To them, survival was a state of being, maintained by caution and wisdom. To these humans, survival was an action, a constant, violent struggle against entropy itself. Days turned into a tense, protracted week. The Xylosians maintained their siege, but they didn't attack. They were studying humanity now, trying to understand. They observed the humans' frantic, ingenious efforts to repair their ship using parts that should have been useless. They saw a mother fashion a working air filter from cloth scraps and crushed minerals. They saw a team of engineers rewire the ship's entire power grid using salvaged cables and pure intuition. They saw a child solve a complex navigational problem as a game. Valerius began to see them not as a contagion, but as a force of nature. They were like water, of finding a way through the smallest crack or fire, consuming everything in its path, or life itself, stubbornly clinging to the most barren rock. They were messy, chaotic, and terrifyingly potent. Finally, he made a decision that would ripple through the galactic community for eons. He opened a channel to Alara. Behind him, the bridge of his cruiser was filled with his senior officers, their faces a mixture of apprehension and respect. "We have analyzed your species," he began. "It should not exist." Alara waited. Her should not exist. Alara waited, her expression unreadable. "However," Valerius continued, "our metrics are clearly flawed. They failed to account for one variable: your reactivity, your refusal to accept a negative outcome, your capacity to transform desperation into innovation, and fear into a weapon." He paused, drawing himself up. The Xylosian Confederacy has no precedent for your kind. You are too dangerous to be allowed to wander uncontrolled. But you are also too resilient to be simply eliminated. We have therefore reached a compromise." Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. "What kind of compromise?" "There is a system on the far edge of our territory. A harsh system, with 3 marginally habitable worlds. The largest is desert, one is a frozen tundra, and the third has a toxic but breathable atmosphere. It is resource poor and considered worthless. We will grant you safe passage to this system. You will be given a century of isolation to establish yourselves. After that, we will talk again." It wasn't a gift. It was a test. They were being thrown into a wasteland to see if they could survive. It was an insult wrapped in an opportunity. The crew of the Starfall listened to the offer. A century of hard labor on dead worlds. Another struggle for existence. Some wept. Some clenched their fists in silent rage. But Alara, looking at the determined, battered, magnificent faces of her people, knew what their answer would be. She looked back at the Xylosian commander. "We'll take it," she said, "and thank you." Valerius looked surprised. "Thank you? It is a desolate, unforgiving place." Ilara allowed herself a small, weary smile. Exactly. It's perfect. As the Starfall changed course, limping towards its new, harsh home, the Xylosian cruiser watched it go. Dr. Valerius felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He had just given a cornered, wounded, and unimaginably angry species a place to call their own. He had given them space to grow, resources to exploit, and a century of peace to rebuild. He looked at his own perfect, powerful ship, at his ancient, wise civilization, and for the first time, he felt a flicker of doubt. He had just unleashed a problem he couldn't solve onto the galaxy. He could only hope that in 100 years, when humanity looked up from their desert tundra and toxic worlds, they would remember this day not as a defeat, but as the day they were given a chance. And he prayed they would be happy, because if they weren't, he had a terrible feeling that the entire galaxy would soon find out just how unhappy humanity could be.